I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. It's a sunny day here in New York City. I am joined by my friend, Andrew Kuo. How are you, dude?
Pretty fucking zenned out, man. I'm feeling pretty tranquil. It's Monday. It's beautiful outside in New York City. I'm listening to Smash Mouth. Rest in peace. I'm wearing my flannel. Got some torn up jeans, some Doc Martens.
Is that Mudhoney that I hear in the background?
Super Fuzz Big Muff. Screaming Trees in the lab as I pod.
Mookie Blaylock in the building.
Wow. I just read somewhere that I think Eddie Vedder's like 50 something, which is crazy, right? Because these celebrities should be encased in amber and never age, never cut their hair, never do anything except sing even flow.
They should just die young, like a superstar is supposed to.
Like Kurt Cobain.
Such as Kurt Cobain. Speaking of a coincidence that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, there is a new drop in the Cookies Hoop store. There are some hats, there are some hoodies, there are some tees in our little Zen Master capsule, little collection, whatever you want to call it. They're all extremely nice, so if you're looking for some early spring drip to get those flowers blooming within a couple months, I don't know where this metaphor is going, but they're in the store right now. So
In
anyway,
bloom.
they're in
Thought that was a
bloom
Nirvana
now.
joke. Right. Yeah, they're going fast, so I don't want to be the hype guy here, but if you are interested, peep our shop, cookieshoops.com, before they're gone, because we loathe to reprint anything.
Are you the hype guy?
I am... God, I'm so sick of... I'm Bez. I was going to say, I'm so sick of the hype guy always being Flavor Flav, but Bez is a king from the Happy Mondays.
You've been the short king. You've been the sink eater. You've been the hookah wearer. Mm-hmm. Are you now the hype guy?
I would say I've always been the hype guy throughout. It's all encompassing. It's like, oh, do you watch Shogun? Do you watch Curb? I'm like, I watch TV, so yes to everything.
Wow, the horns went off.
Are you on a yacht? No, go ahead.
I am. I'm on a yacht.
Mm-hmm.
You just had a point there about, you being the hype guy. And we talk a lot on this pod about your Wallabies, your Knicks shorts. Mm-hmm. There's one thing that I remembered was part of the Kuo look that never gets talked about. The Inside Out t-shirt.
Right. I wear the Inside Out t-shirt all the time. Mostly because when I go out after studio, sometimes my t-shirt is dirty and I turn it inside out because it's a little less dirty depending on what paint I get on my smock that afternoon. But through the course of that practice, I just wear my t-shirts inside out, kind of. Shouldn't they be inside out? Shouldn't the stitching be on the outside? We're wearing our socks, pants, and shirts the wrong side out, right? Not that it matters.
Yeah, this would be like the worst version of crisscross.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Have you seen these teen rappers? They wear their clothes inside out.
Well, it looks the same, so it's not marketable. As a hype man, I'd be like, we got to figure something else out, like where your sweatshirt's so baggy that they're pants, tight pants. But
what about sweatshirts inside out? Because that fleecy lining then would be external. And
I start
the
with
smooth finish would be inside.
I wear my sweatshirts inside out right off the jump. when I order them and I bust them open from cookieshoops.com exclusively, I like to wear them out because the fleece is so nice before you wash it like 2 or 3 times. So the question is, do you prefer, everyone wears their clothes for looks and comfort, but to various proportions. Do you wear your clothes more for looks or comfort?
That's a good question. There are very few things that I would wear just for looks, even if they were uncomfortable. I'm not going to like Alexander McQueen.
How comfy are those Dries coats?
They're comfy.
What about
They
those?
are comfy coats.
What about Portuguese leather gloves?
Those kind of shrunk, I gotta say. So if anyone's going to Portugal, let me know. That's what I get for wearing goat skin gloves, wherever they are.
What are you, a Hall of Fame running back from the Buffalo Bills? Chicken riggies? That's what they called you on the field on Sundays.
If the gloves fit,
Yeah.
you must have quit.
So I think wearing sweatshirts and t-shirts inside out sometimes, like, they're not like actually noticeably more comfortable, but they feel right. So I'm okay with them and they look fine enough. Like, I am not going into like a business meeting wearing this shit. But I have not been in a business
When you wear
meeting.
the sweatshirt inside out, that are you giving us the fleecy feel for our benefit, or is it because you are also kind of just touching yourself wearing it? Like, is it that we can see and even touch, like in a tactile sense, how
So-
fleecy and woolen you are?
So this is where I was going with this, because comfort kind of is a state of mind, sort of like our Nirvana drop. It is a peaceful Gen X place. But like, it's not like you can feel the soft fleece on your skin because you're wearing a t-shirt underneath the sweatshirt and all that. But you do feel the sweatshirt when it's on the outside. So it is comfortable, but it also feels comfortable. So like, I'm not sure Hoka's were actually, past tense, more comfortable than me sliding like really good insoles into my whatever Nikes.
Is this kind of like ribbed condoms?
Well, an inside-out sweatshirt isn't for their pleasure.
I wear all my ribbed condoms inside out for my pleasure.
Yeah, that would be a different kind of usage of that thing. But yeah, I like to wear my shit inside out. I've been doing it since kind of forever. Like, I think it started in college and studio. But sweatshirts, obviously, because when it's cold in my studio and I'm making a masterpiece, man, and I get a little bit of paint on me, just flip that inside out so people still think I'm a big-time baller.
I'm glad I got to the bottom of this origin mythology for the inside-out clothing. It just struck me the other day. I was like, we talk a lot about the other components of the quo aesthetic, and we've never gotten to the bottom of the inside-out T-shirts and sweatshirts. And now we have, in other sartorial news, your man Joe Biden is running around here in Hoka's, which we're getting roasted by the New York Post, which almost makes Joe Biden seem cool.
It's a tough call, right? It depends on where you are with Hoka's.
Like,
So
everyone's kind of wrong on this one.
Yep. The New York Post, amazing kind of edgelordy newspaper, is like, is he so decrepit and so old? Is the damn crypt keeper wearing shoes so wide and so soft that he doesn't fall over again, because he did fall over this week, to prevent us from witnessing this catastrophe? I'm like, probably, but also those are just Hoka's, and the Post is getting roasted online because everyone's like, I have those shoes, they're very comfortable, they look good, does it make us like him more? It's very confusing. I ditched Hoka's a few years ago.
I've kept the boots and some of the slides. I'm pretty much out on wearing the other ones around town. And part of that is just their popularity amongst like a certain metropolitan / suburban set, where I'd rather just wear New Balance if I'm going old head.
Wow. Boston.
I'm Boston
Tiny
strong.
green hand. Yeah, you are Boston. Wow. Yeah, I mean, since the theme of this episode is 90s alternative fashion, like, I have nothing against Hoka's. They're great shoes. I enjoyed my run with them blissfully.
Same.
What great
Same.
memories.
It was like walking on air.
Yeah, but sort of like, I've never worn a red hat in my life, but I wouldn't wear a red hat. I have nothing against those either. But since certain people wear them, I'm like, I'll just choose a different hat. With Hoka's, like, the people that were closer to me that weren't obsessed with pedophiles and the drinking of blood, that were just chilling at the bar wearing Hoka's, I was like, you know what? I remember buying Bleach when it came out, being mad at Nevermind because it was on a major label. I'm going to veer back towards just shitty shoes, like, and I know every kind of shoe. I'm not wearing like a tertiary brand, but I've relinquished my Hoka obsession.
The Sub Pop ones.
Yeah, and I felt bad, right? 'Cause, I mean, not to pull the curtain away, but like, we had a Hoka hookup, and even the Hoka hookup, I confessed, I was like, she's like, why haven't you ordered your Hokas? I'll send you a box. You and Ben can have whatever you want. And I was like, I feel like they're kind of for other people. She was like, same, I don't even want to wear them. Like, I'm out. And I think she has moved on to a different shoe company in her work life as well.
I'm still in on the boots. I think the boots are good.
They're sick, but ooh, it's a fine line. What's up, Biden? I know who you're voting for. Is that an endorsement for the king, Joe Biden?
Here's the thing about Joe Biden wearing Hoka's. Is that good or bad for the brand?
I think it's good.
Like, if your audience is there defending and saying, I have this shoe, and they're talking to the president, you're going to get a bunch of, say, you know, New York Post readers who are older and being like, well, Biden has them, but everyone seems to say they're great and they're really good for their arches, and my feet hurt.
The question is, who do you think Hoka's audience is? Because I think it's exactly the people who are into Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden is like, he's going to get half the country into him, at least. I think he's going to win pretty easily. But, like, you know, that people who vote for Democrats want Hoka's.
I mean, that's true. I'm also saying that I don't really know how the aging Republican voter chooses their footwear. Are they just wearing New Balance? I mean, I don't know how the age breaks down.
Have you seen the Trump ones in person? Have you seen them on the streets anywhere?
No. I've only seen them in photos, and I believe when Fat Joe held them up.
Right. Do they exist? Like, have you seen the Apple Vision Pro anywhere?
Never. Only when J.J. Redick wore it getting outside of his car.
Does J.J. Redick have the only pair in existence?
Wait, what was the deal with that, though, also? Was it that they gave out a few, or is it on sale? Can you go buy it?
Yeah, you can just pick them up. $3,500, I think. Yeah, you can have one in 20 minutes.
I haven't even seen one since.
No one wants
after
to.
After that first week, I haven't seen them in public. I haven't seen people talk about using them. It's like I almost thought they weren't even out. Like, they just, here's a prototype, wear it around for a few days, let's get some hype.
Well,
I
now
can't believe you can just go get it.
Now I'm having doubts because I have not seen them out either. But I think you can just go out and buy them, because if you do like a search for them on social media, people have them being like, "Oh, I'm making dinner. This is cool." That technology is fucking amazing. Like, I am not denying that technology, but our vanity is important to us, and we like to wear our sweatshirts inside out and not have huge goggles on our heads when we have beer.
I'm on their website. I clicked buy. I don't know, from $3,500 or $291 a month. I guess you can buy it.
Yeah, I think you can buy. I think I saw them in the Apple Store in Brooklyn, but they're amazing. They're just too whack looking. Like, Hoka hit the right little lane because they were so whack but still pretty accessible. And Hoka's doing a great job, man. I love what they're producing. Those shoes look good. The collabs look cool. But, you know, are you into In Utero? Stop following Nirvana when they signed major label.
I mean, Hoka was also in a really great position to benefit from both the ugly shoe trend and the sort of geriatric old man sneaker trend and the running fitness trend. They were just in a really good vector where all those things came together. And it was like, oh, these are crazy looking. Yeah, but so are Balenci's. Oh, well, these are really comfortable. Isn't that good for you? Don't you like to have really comfortable shoes like Mephistos and stuff? And then also just being a brand that people were unfamiliar with except for like true heads. It was like a really good combination of attributes that like 5 years ago, let's say. And they were also collaborating like with our friend from Kalina Strada. Like they did it in a smart
ceremony.
way. So,
Yep.
yeah, they did a good job.
It was a kind of a sleight of hand because they did kind of what New York clubs and hotels do when they first start. And, you know, talking to our friends that were around that company, it was already baked in. They were already going to have a major label record. Like, this was kind of like Beck's trajectory, right? Not to, I'm going 90s this episode. But, like, Beck came out with...
Unlike all of our other episodes. And maybe we should talk about conspiracies at some point, too.
But, like, you know, Beck started small 4-track, got DGC to put out Loser, and then, like, went kind of underground and started making smaller records, One Foot in the Grave, did international pop underground stuff as kind of, like, to bait a certain audience in the way clubs here, like, do you guys want to throw a party? We'll let you kids take over, make it cool, and then flip it on you and just make money. Like, eventually, you don't want to be Black Flag, you want to be Blink-182. So Hoka kind of did that with a pointed strategy, like, on purpose. They were like, well, we're going to seed them, basic seeding strategy, to all the homies. We're going to let you guys wear the fuck out of them for 3 years, 4 years, and then we won't care about you. And then we're just going to start selling them to Joe Biden because that's when the real money happens. They're not making money off of, like, Canal Street. Although, you know, like, I love those shoes. They were cool. Rest in peace.
I'm trying to think of who's a good example that fits under that exact paradigm. Black Eyed Peas.
I mean, Beck, right? Like, after Beck was done with that Northwest jaunt, he just put out, like, Odelay. And it's like, right, you want to win a Grammy record. Like, that's...
Beck's a good one. I was just like, Black Eyed Peas. I was trying to think of an alternative where they were kind of like a backpackery group with breakdancers making songs about being a real MC and, like, dancing in their videos. And then later, like, actually, we're adding a white chick. And we're going to make a song called, like, Let's Get R-Worded.
I mean, Fergie's one of the most incredible performers, man. Live, she's just insane. But, like, respect to Fergie, a reformed addict. We were talking about addiction last episode. But, like, yeah, we're talking about plants, right? And the way to trick us at first would be like, oh, it's just like one of you guys. They're interested in what you're interested. Like the 40 elements of hip-hop. It's like, well, there's a 41st element, and that's making fucking money.
This feels like a good segue into a story that hit really close to home here in the Cookies family.
But only close to home, it seems.
Yeah. The New York Times wrote a story about this fellow named Ashwin. And I believe... What was the name of the story? Something about, like, how to win friends and hustle people or something like that?
Sure. Get rich or die trying. I think that was the name. Or
along those lines.
Yeah.
So, Cookies Hoops has been caught up in this web of deception, too. We have been on the receiving end of pizzas off of perhaps ill-gotten fortune. Ash and Williamsburg Pizza, who he was partial owner of, have donated pizza pies to our basketball tournaments in the past. They've had teams, and we've known Ashwin from around downtown for a while.
A long time.
And this story, and this story is about how he's a real knave.
You gonna drop the
ripping off-
N-bomb?
The knave.
Woo!
This scoundrel was going around ripping people off. And
Allegedly.
he was allegedly. Well, this is what the story says. The story. Well, I mean, we're not in a court of law here. The story says he was ripping people off, and they present it as a very egalitarian hustle, where he was grifting from $1,000 from a friend, a $10,000 from an old woman, $100,000 from a brand, $300,000 from real estate, whatever. He was just out here taking from whoever he could. And that there hadn't really been any ramifications other than him kind of settling with people and paying some of it back. There was no mention of arrests or any charges or anything like that whatsoever. So it was an interesting story in that it was a takedown piece of this fellow, Ashwin, who is kind of a I would not say a fixture downtown, but he's around quite a bit. And it didn't say that he committed any particular crime, though.
And I think we should frame it, I think, broader. He is a partner in Superiority Burger who got stars in the New York Times and publicly took that victory lap with them. He's a partner in this nightclub called Jeans, which is popular right now on Lafayette Street with a restaurant attached to that. It's a restaurant of note currently. Superiority Burger, he was involved in Oatly when they first started. So, if you follow him on Twitter, he's always pitching real estate ideas. It's like, if anyone has money, I found a building. I'm looking for big ballers only, stuff like that. And
right. Like, does anyone know any high-powered people over at blank? They should
Yes.
connect with me, which you would presume would also be a high-powered mover and shaker off of his tonality in these kind of social media posts.
he was a partner in this bar called Short Stories that was hot for a second, and on Bowery. And this article kind of paints the picture of him kind of charming these people with actual money and him borrowing money from other people with his charm to get access to other projects. So I believe he took $100K from the owner of Spicy Moon, a Chinese restaurant, in order to buy in maybe Superiority. And this is not quite a Ponzi scheme. I think that phrase is kind of used a little loosely, but he is borrowing money to spend money. And this article was fascinating because apparently his own personal wealth was not changed, and he lived in a modest apartment that had been unkept the article was it did him dirty, no pun intended, but sort of like the MIA truffle fries. There were French fries on the ground, and he kind of smelled bad, and kind of these unsavory details that I was kind of grasping, clutching my pearls when I heard it. I was like, wow, they're going after him a little bit. The New York Times calling him smelly. Let's go. So
yeah, I agree. I think being a New York scammer hustler, that's the reason for the story. But I think most people could read that and be like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of people do this shit. Is he trustworthy? No. But was he just sort of doing the typical fake it till you make it thing?
Yeah.
What's the phrase? Paying Peter to pay back Paul, or whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
He was just kind of wheeling and dealing. He'd get busted. He'd pay some at the back. He'd settle. It did not seem any different from a lot of people who do this kind of shit.
He was a chameleon.
Is it that different from Jared Kushner? I just mean,
Right. Well, that's a interesting example, that whole family, because the article pointed out one of the grievances towards him was he moved through the investor sphere, the tech sphere, the startup sphere, and then the downtown cool sphere. I'm like, is this not like The Great Gatsby? Jared Kushner is not an international diplomat. He's a failed real estate mogul, right? Donald Trump is a Manhattan real estate mogul who ends up being a Nazi. You know, it's like, hey, man, many faces. And, like, that is not his crime. Like, after reading that article, I was texting you. I was like, I feel bad because I think this is so delicious because I love scammers. But I'm not sure Ash did anything, like, to make me mad at him through reading this article. I would hesitate at giving him any cash. But, like...
yeah. I think that's a key takeaway is don't give this guy cash. I would agree on that. But it
also,
didn't make me dislike him anymore, though. I'm just like, I'm like, people were like, oh, you know him? And I was like, yeah, I like him.
I don't want to
anything wrong to me.
I don't want to victim blame, though, right? Because, like, when you give someone $100K, better do your research. I don't know. Make sure, like, that person is not just likable. Because when they interviewed his current partners, I believe mostly Gene's, but even Superiority, they're like, oh, we're aware of this. We handled it. It's over. I'm like, that is kind of the correct response here. Being like, ooh, that's super annoying. We'll just pay them back. And then, like, what else would you like us to say about it?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I have nothing bad to say about the guy. That's like, I know him. We're cool. He gave us some pizzas on occasion. Got nothing bad to say. Yes, it turns out that he is an untrustworthy guy, a real varlet. You know, he's a cad, a scoundrel. But like, yeah, I don't know. He didn't rip me off.
I've been quote unquote ripped off by one of our mutual friends, quote unquote, for thousands of dollars. But this guy is like a wonderful dude. And, you know, he asked me for money, being like, I'll pay you back. You know, it's like, it's all good. Like, I'm going to get paid. There's a big job coming. And I'm like, I'll never see this money again, but I love you. So, like, this is not $100K. This is just a few $1,000s to pay his bills. But, like, I knew kind of what I was getting into. I was like, I'm never going to see this money again. And that just has to be okay.
Yeah, the situation with Ash was a little different because he was doing some pretty, like, kind of hilariously devious stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, do you want to invest in this restaurant? And you just give people, like, fake paperwork and take their money. And be like,
yeah.
No, you're not an investor in this. But I paid Ash. Like, so he just gave you worthless documents.
If he was more famous, he'd be in big trouble. But he's not super famous. And in the article, he's like, you may not know this person, but you may have heard of Superiority Burger. And I'm like, ooh, that's even a deep cut a little. That's more Mudhoney than Nirvana. And people love Mudhoney, you know.
You know, we knew a lot of people who read this article and chatted about it. I do not think it had any hype outside of that. I do wonder if the New York Times spent a year on this story with, like, multiple reporters working on it, along with, I think, Joe Bernstein. Mm-hmm. I believe he was the main writer. Yeah. If there wasn't at least the inkling that this could be their Anna Delvey story, that this could be their hipster grifter story, that this could be a movie, this could be something huge, and it just wasn't.
Yeah, I'm like, who did this affect someone famous that we've heard of?
As you were saying, it's just too deep of a cut, and it's too much financial stuff. It wasn't Anna Delvey ripping people off, and they're sitting around in some sultanate somewhere, and they have to take planes back, and she's rolling around with these lavish things. He was just stealing money.
Yeah, like hundreds of thousands, which is a fucking lot of money, but we're not talking about like millions here. You know, he's still like on his bicycle in the Lower East Side, East Village. It's not like he's on a private plane.
But it was also in pursuit of, like, business legitimacy. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just the lifestyle, even though the story kind of tried to make it as if it was about, you know, his insecurity, and it was about his, you know, whether he was about his weight or that he wasn't cool and he wanted to be, or he smelled and he wanted to be a mover and shaker and he wanted to be a kingmaker downtown. And though there may be elements of truth in that, I can't say. I don't know. But ultimately, it seemed like he kind of thought he could pull this off until he made a bunch of money and then get away with it.
Yeah. I mean, as someone with a Napoleon complex, I get where he's coming from, because you're like a not white person in a seemingly white world. Like, New York feels like there's micro situations to conquer, and they just kind of they roll down a hill and gather until you're doing what he did. But like, I don't know, this idea, we've met everyone in New York City, I think, has met many of these kinds of people. He was just like good at it. I can think of like 3 or 4 of our friends who were just like got booted before they could get started. He got pretty far, and I remember, I mean, he's still somebody I would say what's up to. I don't know, like I
got no problem with that. Again, like, he didn't do anything to me, and he can. I'll say what's up to him, sure.
Yeah, and ask him if he's okay, because there's certain point, and this is where I find myself being my weakest version. Sometimes people do bad stuff, and it's by accident or it's on purpose. It's hard to tell. But sometimes I'm just like, this seems like an addiction. No one wants to do this. So, like, are you okay, man? Because, like, no one wants to be hated by the people that they just meet, their partners. And, like, it feels compulsive. And I'm like, is there therapy for this kind of behavior, if anything? Because I certainly don't think, like, suing him is going to solve much.
Look, I have no idea what his finances are. No idea. I read the article.
The article did not disclose.
Right, and we know it implied that he didn't have much money and got bailed out by his parents sometimes, but we also do know that he was involved with these other places, and whether his share of Williamsburg Pizza was smaller than he presented it as. Again, I don't know the specifics. But that said, it felt like there were a few potential off-ramps that he could have taken and just didn't.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Maybe it is compulsive, maybe not understanding the breadth of trouble that he'd incurred, that he couldn't just do that because he always was trying to pay people back money, or scamming one person to scam the next person to pay back the other person, whatever. Maybe it was, as you said, this sort of like the avalanche as it's rolling downhill. I have no clue. But the part about the Oatly marketing contract, where he went in there and he knew someone who worked for the company, another brand that we talked about and no longer are particularly affiliated with, not affiliated, have no real affinity for. We're early on the Oatly oat milk jargon.
Delicious.
But yeah, now I've been back on regular whole milk for years. But anyway,
I do whole milk, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, the Oatly thing, he apparently wowed the staff and with a deck and a presentation, and they gave him, I don't know, $250,000 for a marketing campaign, like a huge marketing campaign, and he just didn't do it. Like, he could have hired a bunch of Zoomers at basically no cost and probably just done the campaign that he promised and been like up and running as a digital / social media creative agency. And he just didn't even bother. He just kept the money until they chased him down, and he gave a bunch of it back. That was it.
I mean, something's happening there. Some sort of anxiety, some sort of, I cannot speak to it, but that's, on one hand, I'm like, at least somebody who's doing this hustle, and that's going a little too far. That Oatly situation was a step farther than what I'm talking about. But like, moving money to make things happen in New York City until you can get a nest egg to actually be stable. Like, shout out to that person, a person who's not a Nepo baby, who isn't a Kushner, who isn't like the son or daughter of a very wealthy person, who, like, usually if you get to the bottom of like, whose club is this? Whose hotel is this? It's usually some like white dude who has cash to burn. So like,
Jeffrey Epstein again. Got it.
But like, a lot of these places are like, hey, it costs so much money to get anything done in New York City. So like, I could see him getting caught up in all this. That part of New York City is like not as interesting to me, but I've surely enjoyed like the things that they make, right? Like, the article describes jeans as like I've not been yet, but like pretty fun place, and like no one's really mad at the things he's creating. Superiority Burger is beloved. So at the time, Williamsburg Pizza, when he was there, beloved, still beloved. Like these are things people like, right?
Well, yeah. To my earlier point about an off ramp was that he did seem to have good instincts for picking projects. He did seem to have good instincts for marketing, for getting press. Like he was pretty successful at these components of the job where if he had just figured out a way to do it legally or without screwing people over constantly, he might have been able to accomplish the same stuff. Like it's possible. I don't know how
The article
much
says that. Yeah, the article is like, he is so good at this, he would have been successful anywhere, but he just had to pick one thing and chill out.
Yeah, I don't get.
I mean, it's hubris, right?
I don't know how much the thieving actually benefited him ultimately.
That's what I mean, right?
It seemed like it was actually a fairly disastrous component of his rise to fame from being just sort of a nice, quiet guy to attempting to become, a Peter Gatien-esque impresario.
Right. I mean, there's that trope of that, like, that lonely hustler, right? I don't know, man. That the language in which people who want to move through that world use, like, it's hard for me to decipher sometimes, but it does feel like, and we talk about songbirds all the time, talking about basketball, but it did seem like sometimes it seems like some of that language is scripted, and some of these actions are just kind of like there to grab, like it's tempting to do it. I mean, we know a little bit about the insides and outs and ups and downs of these companies that he's involved in, and like he kind of came through and like made it happen. And there's a talent there that I think is underrated. It's like a lot of these places were shaky, and then he came through, and I didn't know that it was like not actually on the up and up, but like he made it happen. I heard about jeans for years, and it's open, and
Ash took me on a walkthrough of jeans before the pandemic, I think.
Yeah.
Like years and years and years ago. I believe it was before the pandemic, or a long time ago.
Yeah, and Superiority had a tough time through the pandemic, and it's amazing now. It's 3 times as big. There's a bar in the back. It got stars from the New York Times. Like, Brooks is putting out amazing food. People are enjoying it. It's awesome. And there's rumors of another club across the street. But like the takedown piece of the nightlife person, I think, as a genre is always interesting. But as I get older and I'm kind of aging out of that scene, I feel very protective of it. I'm just like, hey, if we don't have people like this, I mean, not like Ash literally, but if you don't have people kind of making sus deals, we don't get clubs a lot of the times. And those clubs are hanging on by a thread, and they do eventually fall apart, but they're part of our history.
Yeah, I don't know how New York City nightlife establishments are going to, what criteria they're going to fall in going forward. Is it going to be Models and Bottles? Is it going to be Tough Door? Is it going to be these kind of combination like dining club / nightclub? However it shakes out, I'm sure it'll all be. So a lot of it will be cyclical. You'll have lounges. You'll have big mega clubs. It all kind of comes, circling back around. But also, the amount of illegality involved in these places is kind of a good thing. Like, kind of. Do we want everything just to be Tao Group? There is an element of nefariousness that I think kind of helps nightlife. And the unsavory element of it is what makes it interesting and even more enchanting than it just being like a hedge fund. There's nothing about Lavo or Tao Group or even their beloved meatballs the Avenue Cantina, that has never appealed necessarily to us.
Yeah, this goes back to the whole like sellout idea, right? And like if you are one of those people, and I don't really consider myself one, who thinks like New York City was better culturally when there was more lawlessness, like with Basquiat, Keith Haring, like the giants, the gods of New York that still preside over our lives in a way that we cannot fucking shake Andy Warhol. It always comes back to Andy Warhol, and it drives me nuts because I don't think he's garnered enough cultural equity to still be in the conversation 40 years later. But anyway, if you enjoy that kind of vision of New York City, then like we got to bring stuff back. Not only lawlessness, but it takes a form of like slumlords, maybe dubious places for people to live and gather and create for an affordable price. Like if you think there are not enough artists and there's no CBGBs and there's not going to be another David Byrne or Patti Smith, it's like that lawlessness is what it takes. And it's not like Lavo meatballs at MSG or even jeans. Like that's a bit up there, but it's in the tradition of Mr. Chow and the Mud Club and all that stuff. But I don't know, especially since the subway thing, the subway conflict that was horrifying this week happened. I don't think New York City's at a place where we want lawlessness necessarily. And that comes with a reverse tax.
Yeah, I think when people say I want the lawless New York, it's that they want the New York City that coincided with lawlessness, but was not necessarily related to the lawlessness. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I want it to be grittier and cheaper and more affordable and these fun parties downtown that we can go to. Well, I don't really want to get robbed.
Yeah.
I just mean those things were kind of the same time. It was
I got no running water in my
yeah,
right.
the economics of the city were really bad and crime was rampant. Therefore, young and cool people were able to live and play and work in places that they can't now, that the city is extraordinarily expensive. I understand the sentiment here. I just mean
Yeah.
It's like, damn, I wish I was getting stabbed right now. That'd be so cool. If I was doing a little graffiti and someone came up and hit me in the head with a chain. I'd like that.
Well, it's like you can't have an affordable place and have it be safe and well run and close to amenities like a farmer's market. Like prices kind of reflect demand, and demands reflect what people want, obviously. That shooting in the subway that we were talking about, like there was a lot of, so it was, someone captured it on their iPhone, but a guy who was having an episode, something happened, started yelling at another guy. There was racial words. We don't know that much about the background. It was wild. It was fucking wild. They square up. Everyone in the subway is like, we've seen this before. This is fine. And then motherfucker has a friend 10 feet away with a knife, and she stabs the aggressive dude in the back, and he's bleeding out, and he's like, did someone stab me? I'm like, that is fucking crazy. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
The guy pulls a gun. He gets shot by his own gun. He dies. But what went viral is the annoying politicization of it, which is like you had a woman screaming for the cops, and they're like, oh, you guys, New York didn't want cops. I thought you guys were defund the police, but now you want them now that you're in this situation. I'm like, no, New York elected a cop for mayor. New York wants police, but New York is cool with people expressing themselves who don't want police.
Yeah, I couldn't be bothered with all that, even though I fully understand and dislike that interaction. Just overall, yeah. All right, here's my thing, man. We know the numbers of New York City being safe. We talk about this on the pod a lot. And we also know that there are going to be these kind of harrowing incidents in a city of this many people. It's just going to happen. And whether the motivations are, anti, immigrant sentiments, or it's because of race, or it could be because of all types of stuff. I just mean, whatever it is, right? It could be, there's always going to be a motivation for some crazy shit that happens. All right, this is because someone stepped on someone's shoe. It could be anything. I'm not talking specifically about this. And the motivations, they can matter. I just mean overall, there are going to be incidents of violence. They're just going to happen. There are that many people here. That's how the world works. And we know statistically New York is a safe city in comparison to international cities, in comparison to other domestic cities. It is a relatively safe, large city. And specifically, because of New York's segregation, it's really safe in most areas that are expensive. There are isolated pockets of poverty where there is far more crime than in other neighborhoods. Whether that's, I don't know, like Jamaica, Queens, or East New York, or South Bronx. Exactly. There are certain places where crime is absolutely an issue. There is violence, and that's terrible. And there needs to be ways to address that and make those neighborhoods safer, etc. For most people, this is a safe city, but it's even more safe than the numbers show because of where people live, where they congregate, who are also the ones largely yelling about this kind of stuff. So I think we've reached this really tricky place because of social media, because of the press, because these kind of incidents, in the same way that, if it bleeds, it leads, was always the mantra for the tabloid. Stick a shooting on the front cover and watch it sell. Evening news at 11, we'll start with a shooting that occurred. But now it's this 24-hour cycle of people on their phones. And, within 2 hours of that video going online, I feel like everyone I know had already seen it. And we'd already put ourselves in that subway car with everyone screaming and this, terrifying scenario with this gunman and bullets going on, bouncing around, and someone being shot in the head, people screaming for the cops. And we've all been in subway cars a million times. We can mentally put ourselves into that position. And I don't know how you calm things down when you have this level of access to the horrors of the city. If you had one of these things happen a month, you'd say, basically we're crime free, except that once a month people would be seeing these horrible situations, and I don't know how you cool it off. I just can't really figure out how you actually can make the perception reflect the reality. You can dump the National Guard in the subway, you can put more cops down there, you can put people searching bags for weapons, you can put all these metal grates onto the subway tracks to thwart would-be pushers, subway shovers. And yet it only takes a couple things to get people back in fear mode.
I would argue there is no fear mode. The people who are talking about that don't even live in New York. I think people are like, ooh, that's crazy. It happened at Schermerhorn, which is like a very wealthy area stop in downtown Brooklyn, which was surprising. But, whatever. 2 stops away. It was a couple stops away from the Chauncey, whatever. New York is kind of small in actuality, but I would argue it didn't really affect people who use the subway. It's alarming, and I would argue that the connectivity that you're talking about with people taking first-person footage of this incident and us seeing it kind of very quickly all together is helpful, because it kind of demystifies this boogeyman of like, oh, there's going to be a strange person in the subway and I don't know how to identify him. When we see it, we're just like, oh, damn, I've ridden the subway with people like that. Oof. You know, like it is scary, of course, but I think there's no heat that really exists outside of people who want to politicize it.
I mean, I do think there's truth to that. I mostly mean that the solutions seem to be coming from that side,
Of course.
where it's like no one's saying, okay, we need to address some of the root causes of this. It's like, no, not that. More National Guard, more cops, more searches, more this. And I think just overall, politically, we've sort of seen this aligning, whether it's fishhook theory or whatever, the aligning of the centrists and everyone to the right of that, not necessarily on the same page in terms of their perceived enemies, but in their perceived solution, which is like crush everyone, restore order, bring in more cops,
Make our guys in charge, right? Like what?
exactly,
What does?
right?
Yeah. What do edgelord Republicans really want out of New York? Yeah.
Right, that's what I mean. It's like, okay, other than Dime Square going Catholic, what's the goal here?
Yeah, Turtle Bay flipping to Islam. Yeah, like it is a never-ending hamster wheel of grievance, and New York City is always the target for this. Man, city's doing well. I don't want to have those New York City, those pigeon-colored tinted glasses on, but like, and it's not like it's the safest place in the world. I'm like, you better watch yourself a little bit if you're like on the A train at night, late at night. Like, just be spatially aware. Remember we used to talk about street smarts all the time? No one talks about that. When I was a kid, it was like, well, you got to get good grades, but also you can't be a sucker when you're in a situation. And we always like, are they smart or are they street smart? No one talks about that shit, right? I don't need.
Yeah, it's just the city of suckers getting their cash swindled away by would-be restaurateurs and
give me $50K, put it in a box, and give it to Ashwin.
freaking out on the subway.
Someone should do like a movie of all these viral articles in one, sort of like a Seinfeld episode. It's like, well, I need to go to Spicy Moon and get this cash from this woman that I just called and told her she has to withdraw money from her safety deposit box. I'm like, yo. And then she has a cat. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, the lore of New York City is strong, and all this stuff surrounding it is why we live here, right? It is like, the classic NBA thing. It's like living rent-free in your mind. It's like, ew, I wish it was rent-free, actually.
I thought that's where you were going to go with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like thinking about, it's like, okay, so we've got a vice president who's a cop. We got a mayor who's a cop. We got Hochul sending in the National Guards. Hochul, however you say her name.
Hochul.
And they're all Democrats. They're all Democrats. And it's like, oh, who are you concerned about? Well, the unwashed masses who stormed the Capitol, for sure, I'm worried about them. But also the pro-Palestine demonstrators. We don't really like them. The people who are in traffic, we don't like them. It's just everyone just sort of is like, all right, let's restore order. And I think the main crux of this is something that I couldn't say I have much idea how to solve. Is just that politically speaking, in all mainstream politics, people who have power in the United States, regardless of either party, is just kind of a deeply inhuman interest, where it's based on, special interest groups and billionaires and corporations and all this. So like when you're not really based on humans, but you need them for their votes and you need them for their manpower and their work and their money, you kind of end up with this as your solution, being like, let's just crush everyone with our boot.
Yeah, I feel like there's two ways to legislate or govern. It's like one way, to your point, is like, you guys have to behave and we're going to tell you when you're misbehaving. And then the other way is, which optimistically is like, oh, everyone's lives needs to get better, whether that be in small ways or big ways. But like the whole objective of society and government is to make lives better progressively. And you don't get much of that feel in New York. It's almost just like,
I mean,
have you learned your lesson? Did I teach you your lesson?
yeah, you don't get much of that feeling nationally either. And
Yeah.
I think you get the politics of grievance from Republicans who say, hey, wait a minute, other people are getting stuff and I'm not. This isn't really that true. No one's really getting much of anything. And then the Democrats have their own version of responsibility for it, which is they talk a big game about helping people out, but then they're gonna, what's it called when you test? What's it called? The Buttigieg stress test. What's it called? Anyway, you know, basically when they're only giving out little smidgens of you know, of benefits to people, but pretending is that they're doing it for a lot of people, you end up with this kind of situation that we're in where no one's really getting much of anything except that both sides kind of feel as if the other one is taking advantage of them.
And yeah, I voted for Cynthia Nixon because her campaign was kind of like simple. She was like, I don't really know what I'm doing because I'm not a politician. I'm just a New Yorker and shit sucks. Like, why can't we get on a subway and expect to get to work on time? Like, it's just too crowded and it sucks. You know what? I'm not going to do anything before I fix the subway. That's my platform. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of good enough for me because all that other stuff is learned and you can figure out how to like grease whatever wheels that job requires. But yeah, if you were just like, does your morning suck? I'm like, kinda. It's like, well, I want to make it suck a little bit less. I'm like, you got my vote.
Yeah, I just think it was the healthcare debate that really sort of crystallized it for me when you had, you know, the tremendously popular poll numbers in both political parties saying they wanted, you know, nationalized universal health care. It was like 80% of Democrats and like 55% of Republicans. I'm just kind of making those numbers up, but that's what stats are for. And both political parties like, nah. It's like, ooh, something is awry here. Things aren't quite lining up. We have a political issue that everyone wants, that is tremendously popular, that is a winning platform, and both parties are like, yeah, no. It's like, kind of the jig is up.
Did you know, you Bens are all the same. Did you catch your boy Ben Shapiro talking about how 65 years old is a ridiculous time to retire? Actually, retirement's ridiculous. We don't need to retire. We should love our jobs.
Like, you have no dog for your for your daily job?
Yo, he's Mamba mentality. I mean, he's not going to the club. He's working until he's 80.
He's a Celtics fan through and through.
Yeah, he's digging coal deep underground. He's getting he's eating sandwiches for lunch because he can't even wash his hands. He's working so hard.
He's down there in those podcast mines with us.
Yeah. But it's crazy, right? Like, this idea of punishment seems to be the story of our life and lives previous and the boomers. Like, you guys don't know how good you have it in America. Here's more punishment for you. It's like, remember that thing that worked out well for you? We're going to make that less good. You know who really deserves it? People who got rich, because clearly they worked hard enough to get rich. It's like this punishment on a micro and macro level is like dodging bullets in the Matrix.
Well, I'm going to call them immigrants and not migrants. Because I
No.
think migrants is intentionally to like
For
make
sure.
them sound like they're ready to pick apples and they're just sort of
I'm
stopping
calling them
by.
illegals. These illegals make a mean sandwich.
But it's like migrants. Like, no, they're not. They're not here to like pick strawberries in Albany and then head down to South Carolina. Like, I mean, look, many will take whatever jobs you can give them, but they aren't like a migrant farming community necessarily. They're people who are here because they're trying to get a better life, just like your ancestors or my ancestors or whoever.
Arguing about language and syntax is a trick. We can't fall that down.
Yeah,
Everyone
I
knows
agree.
what we mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not fired up about it. I'm just
Yeah.
making that point. Like, they aren't really migrants necessarily, in the terms of our conventional understanding, and they're clearly being called that for a reason. But you are right. Let's not get sucked into that trap. But it's the same way as like everyone just wants there to be someone else at blame. Oh, it's those goddamn illegals. Oh no, it's the BLM marchers. It's the people who stormed the Capitol. Those hayseeds, the yokels who are ruining everything. It's like, I mean, look, I guess we do it too, and we say like, well, billionaires are causing some issues. But at the same time, like, let's punch up. I guess that'd be the phrase.
Yeah, I mean, talk about tricks.
I just think we all blame somebody. Is my general point.
Yeah, I mean, grievance is powerful. Grievance works. It kind of like expresses loneliness, frustration, anxiety, all these things. LeBron James scoring 40,000 points, but
the glazing is insane.
Yeah, and I'm not glazing a lawless New York City. I want to feel safe, and I think whatever. I think it's important that people get old in New York City and don't have to work past 65 and make families here and stay here, and those kids grow up in New York City. Like, if you love this place, like, make it better, invest in it, right? And it's always pushing against. It always feels like pushing against like an argument that I don't want to have. It's like a debate about a debate with somebody who's not happy. And when I think about those big yellow barriers in the subway platforms that people installed, it's interesting because they're visceral. People can talk. When they popped up a few months ago, my friends were texting me about it, just being like, yo, what's up with these? And I'm like, they got to do something. It's just a guardrail. But I get why people are like, is this what we're getting? Is this it? Is this the glazing?
My take on those, which I've not seen in person, so perhaps if I was to come across them in the wild, so to speak, I would have a different take. I just looked at them and thought, well, I suppose there are a few people who would say, I like having that. I'll kind of lean near it. And that way, if anyone wants to shove me under the tracks, I'll have a barrier there. I don't have to stand with, my back to the wall and worry about someone, dragging me off or whatever. Okay, sure. I'm saying there may be peace of mind for some people. My only real take was that I feel like most subway accidents are people intentionally going down there, which this would not stop because you could just go around it and go down. And I do wonder how they'll operate if a subway station is crowded. Like, are you going to get like pinned up against it or, stuck on it and not be able to get around it? I don't know. But again, I have not seen them in real life. I have no problem with the color or anything. I would say there is a little bit of like patheticness to it in the way, just because when you think of other cities and their subway systems are clean, they do have these sort of protective moving shields that only open up when the door is there and then close, and we're like, hey, we're putting chain link fences in our subways. You guys happy now or what?
Yeah, it seems like a really poor solution, but also, is it? I was like, stairs should have rails on them. You put a rail in the middle of a staircase, and I'm like, it's not going to solve much, but like, it's a thing. I don't think those barriers are important or expensive. But my question is like, is this all we're getting? Because I want to make sure. Like, if you're at a buffet, being like, I'm not going to fill up on this fried rice, but if this is all we're getting, I'm going to fill up on this fried rice. It's like, what else is coming out? It's like, well, actually, the meal is done. I was like, give me that fucking bucket of rice, and I hope that's not all we're getting, but I suspect it might be. But who knows?
I'm not going to use it as yet another example of the creep of fascism here. But I just mean, you look at it and you're like, so what have you added? More bars, more metal, more restrictions. You're like,
I mean, I'm not a culture critic here. It doesn't have to be like an ornate kind of like beautiful thing, but I remember growing up in New York when my parents were like, the subways are fucking awful. We don't want to take them, but if you are on them, just like don't be a dummy. This has just been part of New York, right? Like I don't know if there's fixing this. Talk about, like, I don't want to live my life in New York with a grievance about the New York City subway system. I'm just like, cool, they put up barriers. Man, I cannot live here for decades and be obsessed about this. I gotta move on.
I also just don't have any problems with the subway system. I just don't have issues. It's fine. Is it dirtier than it should be? Absolutely. Is it annoying sometimes? Yes. Are you being around?
Sounds like you have grievances.
But I actually don't have grievances. I think that comes with the territory. It's part of being in public in New York City, in a space that you share with, the vast spectrum of humanity. And every now and then, there's going to be annoying stuff. People are going to eat food on the subway or play music loudly or get in a fight. And like, it's just what happens when you're out in public in a city and the subway just is more annoying because you're trapped in a little submarine can or a little, whatever you want to call it. You're in a little place that you can't walk out of immediately or just escape from. And yes, that's annoying and it sucks, but like, I don't have any issues. I just feel like that's unavoidable. I don't know how you would get around saying, yeah, any subway in New York City, even if you made it look beautiful inside, is still just going to have a certain amount of annoying incidents that are going to turn into stories. And that's just how it freaking goes.
Sometimes I feel like sports has really helped me think about this, because when the Knicks were terrible, and the Knicks are really good now, I kind of have trouble living in the moment, and I'm just like, well, what are they doing to sustain this, make it better? Because however well I think they've constructed this team, I'm like, there's stuff in the margins it can keep on getting better. And when they were bad, it was like, it's so hopeless. This is like, we traded for Andrea Bargnani. I'm like, okay, that was a big error that's going to set us back because we gave up picks. But the next move still has to be good, because the whole objective of running this company is to get better and win games. So like, we fucked up the Bargnani thing. It's been 24 hours. Are they going to do something to get better after that? And I kind of think about the subway in those terms. I like how the L train, I never take the L train, but I like how that got better this decade. I don't really go to the West Side, but like, adding stations seems cool. Putting artwork there seems cool. The G train got better in the last 20 years. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I think the subway is obviously imperfect, but I think that kind of comes with the territory. It's like, you can make the NBA a better product, and you're still going to have some flagrant fouls. You're still going to have some Achilles injuries. Like, there's just going to be some shitty stuff that's going to happen no matter what. And I don't think we can get too overexcited about it. But yeah, I think the subway's generally okay. Like, it runs 24/7. It's elaborate. You can get from pretty much anywhere to anywhere for about $3. It really doesn't strike me as like this pulsing, urgent issue that needs to be solved in New York City any more than anything else. I think,
yeah.
I think if you were going to say what are some good things about New York City, the subway is kind of like at the top of the list.
Well, 24 hours is huge. And it being a set rate.
And it gets you around.
Sure. I have in-laws who live way far from any metropolitan city, and they're conservative and they're nice, and I respect their entire lives up till now and how they got here. And they won't come to New York City because they perceive it as a place that's lawless. Like, I joke, but I still think they think Soho is being overrun with vandals, people smashing windows. They're just like, it's not safe there, and I can't carry a gun. And I'm like, I get it. You have limited information. I'm telling you, it's okay. There's beautiful museums full with tourists. There's amazing restaurants, half full of tourists. There's Jeans Club. There's Superiority Burger. There's amazing parks. New York City has done a great job for pedestrians in the last 10 years, I think. It is a walking city.
I was strolling through Soho. I was by Finelli's, and someone fleeced me for $5,000 of investment seed money.
I was chilling with a shoebox full of $50K. I did not want to give it to somebody, but I did. This is my story. Yeah, like as I get older and I'm washed and I don't have like my youthful optimism, I am like weary of bullshit that happens in this city. I'm just like, I can't keep up with young hustle, and at some point I am going to get got, but like until that point I don't know, and I don't know what that looks like invest in this or play this craps game. I don't know, buy this painting. I don't know how I'm gonna get got, but I will get got. But there is no place like this place, and we don't have to do a New York thing, but like good luck. This is the 90s alternative music thing. This should not be for everybody. This place should not be for everybody. You should be scared. If you're scared, it's supposed to make you scared because you don't have that dog or this certain dog, right? Like, it's like, well, I don't like No Doubt. I'm like, you're not supposed to like No Doubt. They're part ska. If you can deal with ska, they'll be good. It's like, well, I don't understand why so many people like them. I'm like, that's not the point. It's not for everybody.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm at, is that I'm not clinging to this idea of New York is this dusty and dangerous place. But if you're coming here and saying, I hate the subways, I'm like, well, you're just kind of missing a part of your brain that says the subways are pretty much fine because that's part of New York City. And that's always been part of New York City. And that doesn't stand in the way of improvement. I just mean, if you hate fundamental things about New York, then go somewhere else.
It's not supposed to be for everybody. And it's like Hollywood. It's like, well, I don't have representation at the Oscars. I'm like, well, the Oscars are not for everybody. They're for a ton of people, but not everybody.
Sorry, that's pretty funny.
Right? Like, how come
you explaining to me that the Oscars are not for me? What? But Andrew.
Well, it's like, well, how come the Best Picture isn't the James or a Mel Gibson feature about Jesus? I'm like, well, the Oscars are kind of run by like people. It's like, do they dig tunnels? Do they drink the blood of children? I'm like, I don't know, maybe.
I just like when people are like, all these pretentious actors and Hollywood critics, they always like French movies. It's like, wait, I thought you liked movies.
No.
Like, what are you arguing about? But look, you want to talk about the politics of grievance? I want to talk about the politics of Gravis. Vasquez, that is. Let's talk hoops.
Whoa, Gravis, Vasquez, Hornets legend. I have not thought about him in a while.
The guy was a dimer.
He was good. He was plotting. Micic reminds me of him. Kind of like slow, plotting Euro point guard. Not small. Kind of like George Niang body. Pretty good passer. Pretty good player.
Yeah, Micic was extremely good in Europe for a while. He was, I want to say, one of Sam Hinkie's last signings. For the
Is that
Sixers.
the same Micic? I get confused. That's him, right? The point guard.
So
He's good.
They traded the rights to him in the Al Horford deal to OKC, who then signed to a multi-year contract and then moved off of it almost immediately. So they weren't impressed, but I guess Charlotte decided to take a flyer on him. I don't know if they got a second-round pick back in the process, whatever. But yeah, that's the guy.
He's not gonna. He has Alexei Shved kind of written all over him in that, like, when people come back healthy and they get LaMelo back, I don't know if he's going to be dropping dimes and scoring like he is, but it's nice to be reminded that like some of these guys sitting on the bench can ball out.
Well, his per 36 numbers are not incredible because he hasn't shot that well in the NBA.
Yeah.
But, putting up 16 points per 36, 8 assists, like, that's not a terrible player. His efficiency is like 55% true shooting percentage, so like a tick below league average. He's actually a decent offensive player. I don't know that he can defend or anything, but I don't know. I think he's a 6'5" point guard, and he's currently 30. So there's not a lot of upside, but yeah, I don't think he's a bum.
Yeah, I mean,
Just leading off with some Vasily Micic content.
we're entering silly season a little bit, where we're following some weird players, man. As
I
players,
really don't like that phrase.
silly season.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
always-
kind of a
it's always
fantasy
annoying.
basketball reference, right? Like when
Yeah.
strange players win you leagues. I have not heard it outside of the nerd castle of fantasy gambling, but I am in that castle, so like it is when strange Euros can win you weeks.
Is Nerd Castle a phrase, or you just come up with that?
I've never heard it, but it's
Nice.
Is it like castle? It's a fortress in my mind. It's delicate. I mean, it comes down with one stone. It shatters like a house of cards, but like it is a castle, and I'm the king.
All right. So since you're the king, there's some good news in your fiefdom.
I know.
Your man OG has returned to the fold after a prolonged absence, and lo and behold, the Knicks are extremely good again. I felt like
Good.
you were saying, give up on the season, tank, forget it all. Now look who's back on the bandwagon.
I did not say that, but I said the whole season depends on the severity of OG and Randall's injuries, and if OG's healthy, that's a number one defense. Randall is an offensive-minded player who's not a terrible defender, but OG back in his 3 games, kind of like your hapless Sixers. That was an easy dub. But, they defeated the Kings, and the Kings are nice. The Kings are not who they used to be, I believe. In the last 15 games, they had a number 6 offense, according to NBA.com. So that's not nothing. They got Fox and Sabonis, so they're firing on their cylinders, and the Knicks on the road beat them with the whirling dervish of Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo. I don't want to do a Magic Johnson tweet recap of their week, but they're not good enough to contend. But if the stars aligned with matchups and health, they can win a few games, maybe a series or two, maybe by accident find themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals, or they can get bounced in 5 games. Julius Randle coming back is going to be interesting, if he can come back, right? Because he is not a good defender, and he will help them as a playmaking 4 who can create his own shot, which they desperately, desperately need. So there's going to be a balance that Tibbs is going to have to find, and Tibbs has done a great job. So there's reason to be psyched on this team, I think.
So since OG's return, they have won 3 of their 3 games, and the defense has notably gone back to being
Terrible
stifling.
teams, though. Like 2 out of 3 are like jokes of it. Sorry about the Sixers, but that was easy.
I mean, they held the Sixers to 79 points 2 games in a row, one without OG with. So who does that speak to? That's more of a Sixers issue.
The Sixers
than,
suck.
than
Right,
the
that's
Knicks.
what I'm saying. Like OG or no OG, the Sixers are bad.
But the following game gave up 93 against Portland and then 91 against Sacramento. I don't care who you're playing in the
That's
modern
good.
NBA, though.
Yeah.
Like, if you're holding teams on average for those 3 games to about 86 points in 3
Are
games.
you not
again,
caring? Like, if they were good teams, I would care more. If it was the Trailblazers, I would care less.
Oh, I agree. I just mean if you're holding over any 3-game stretch and you're holding your opponents to 87 points in this era, worth paying attention to. But more importantly, those 3 games gave the Knicks some breathing room. And, they've been going off and on with Brunson out especially. So right now they're back up in the 4 slot, and they also just had a nice win over Orlando, which is the
That was
reason that
weird.
they are,
Yeah.
a game ahead of them or a half game ahead of them. So the Knicks are now looking as if they're somewhat intact, they'll be back in the running for a first round. Well, not a bye, but they can avoid the play-in and they're kind
Crucial.
of they kind of got to get back into that spot where they can try to play Cleveland or Milwaukee earlier than Boston.
Yep.
I don't love Boston matchup for them, but we'll see. We just haven't really had a chance to watch the full strength Knicks against this Boston team. But the other teams in the East, I think the Knicks can beat, even though Milwaukee's balling right now.
Certainly, I said this on Twitter. The Knicks are good. All these outcomes are possible, but it feels like they don't control their own fate, whether that be health or matchup. Without Randall, they're too small to really do damage versus a big team. And they'll win games in the regular season against Philly and Portland, but Randall not only has to be healthy, he has to be good. And those are big ifs. OG messed up his elbow, I think, versus the Sixers, so I'm still worried about that. He is kind of delicate, to say the least, as a player. But they just have to be healthy for 4 wins. And we'll see. I love the playoff picture kind of taking form. Your Sixers, woof. What's going on there, buddy?
Yeah, well, I was saying the Bucks were balling because I remember they went on that 5-game winning streak, but then they went and they lost 3 of 6. So whatever. The Bucks, Bucks are still on. They're still on fraud watch.
Yeah, I mean Giannis has been kind of in and out of the lineup, so like they got to get Middleton healthy. They are what they are. I don't think they're the threat with Drew, but as long as they have the right matchup and enough firepower, again, they can go.
Giannis has not gotten a lot of burn as an MVP candidate. I think he's firmly third in the public perception, behind Jokic and SGA. I would say he's having a phenomenal year.
Yeah,
phenomenal year. And
remember when you were like, "Who's the biggest fraud?" It was not Giannis, man. It was not Giannis. Giannis was already playing at an MVP level.
Well, my issue with Giannis is his defense and the fact that last year he really did slump from some of his prior numbers. This year he's absolutely awesome. Yeah,
I mean, just in terms of this year. Last year he was not. He was farther from the MVP. I don't know why this MVP is a qualifier, but like
I know.
He is a top 3 player. I love it. I don't know. I'd take Wemby over him, but I don't know. He is awesome. He's got less to prove in the regular season, so like he may be picking matchups or he may just I don't know. But he's good. He's far from MVP though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying he's averaging 31, 6, and 7. Like his efficiency is currently at his career high. Like he's been fantastic this year.
And
like
he's delivered
66% true shooting percentage, 30 points a game. That's like kind of what Embiid was doing too. Whatever. He's been outrageously good.
And I'm thankful because that team is so whack as a collection of personalities that we need them to be good so we can really enjoy their whackness deep into the playoffs. I'm serious. Like, I love this villainy of them, this fun villainy.
Right. No, I know exactly what you mean. Speaking of whackness, the Sixers, they may be headed for the play-in. I don't know how they're going to...
I hate watching that team, man.
I don't know if Embiid's coming back. I don't know when that will be determined. I just have no clue. If he comes back, I think that team should be pretty good if he is
for sure
healthy. They were good before he got hurt. They've added some pieces like Lowry and Buddy Hield that would seemingly be solid components to put into lineups with Embiid.
For sure.
But until then, man, that team is it's a tough watch.
How many Maxey high pick and rolls can we watch? How many Oubre like broken weak side plays can we watch? It's another pick and roll for Maxey. It's like I mean, I love Maxey. My thought watching it was like, Maxey is for sure an all-star this year. But like, and James Harden was for sure not an all-star this year. But when James Harden was like, I am the system, this is kind of what he meant. It's like, hey, if Joel goes down, and let's say Maxey goes down, whatever, you can run a complete offense around my skill set that could be competitive. You can't really do that with Tyrese Maxey.
Philly has 8 wins in its last 25 games. Now, I'm no mathematician, no big city lawyer, but I personally believe that that's bad. 8 of 25. That's not a team that you would typically say is, headed for big things in the postseason. So it all does rely on Embiid's return. As they are a team that is going to get swept in the first round as they currently exist. You just can't be a team that loses 17 of 25 and say, okay, let's make some noise. It's not going to happen.
They're going to lose every play-in game if they're there.
They're just not good without Embiid. It is what it is, and that's not even disrespect to those other guys. That's just the reality of the situation. I'm going to say something that is annoying.
Go ahead.
Again, I think Maxey is a extremely fun player to watch. He is super talented. He's quick. He's skilled. He is everything you wanted from that pick. They got the player that he was potentially going to be, and here he is. When we first saw him come to Philly with a draft pick in the early 20s, he had these irresistible qualities of speed and charm, and the question was, can he become a great shooter? Can he become a good shooter? And he did that. He's become a really good shooter, especially from the on catch and shoot, which unfortunately they don't have any way to set him up with at this point. But he added that skill. He is so fun downhill. He's so great a finisher. All these good things. But if you compare him to those guys that they've had in the past, which again no one's going to like this point, but you compare him to Ben Simmons and Butler, or even James Harden, he just doesn't have that same impact on winning games. It's not to say that he isn't a really good player. He is. He's an all-star, deservedly so. But there was a reason that the Sixers never folded when Embiid went down and they had Simmons or James Harden. Those guys were exceptional in terms of making your team good. Doesn't mean they were great at everything. Harden was not a good defensive player, but he was an offensive genius. Simmons couldn't shoot for shit, but he was incredibly good at defense and pushing the tempo and creating shots for teammates who couldn't do it otherwise. And we see how the Philly is without those kind of superior talents. Maxey is a very good conventional player. Doesn't make him any less of an all-star. But we do know more about him now. That you can't necessarily say, Maxey, here's the ball, create something. Turn this into an offense that's functional. Turn this into a different kind of team without Joel Embiid. So
right.
I think Philly can feel comfortable paying Maxey a max contract. That's great. But right now it's clear that this is still a team that really, 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 really is based on Joel Embiid and some other guys.
Man, not to get too into my weeds, but like there's certain colors in my studio and when I make paintings that are not spectacular at all, but next to a nice color they really activate, and you can use them in certain spots and they look really nice. And I feel that way about like Nicholas Batum or even Tobias Harris, like even a Kelly Oubre or Buddy Hield the eccentric Buddy Hield. Like, they're wonderful pieces next to someone like Joel Embiid, but without Joel Embiid, to your point, they're nothing. All of a sudden they lose their luster and appeal. And when the Sixers added Batum, I was like, that's kind of a great fit. That is useful. He's tall. He's smart. He can pass, and he's kind of a mismatch. But without Embiid, defenses don't really have to pay him any mind. He's been hurt a little bit. Kyle Lowry at this point in his career is like he's a activator for Joel Embiid. He is the yeast for an Embiid type player. So when you take away a heliocentric guy like Joel Embiid, and it's not Morey or the Sixers' fault here. Joel Embiid is just too good. It's hard to build like a Celtics or Knicks team when you have a player as good as Joel Embiid, which is a god-level all-time Hall of Fame guy in his prime, coming off of an MVP. This is the tightrope we talked about in the beginning of the season. If anything happens to that guy, it's going to be dark days.
Yeah, and Maxey, as good as he is, I mean, the guy's averaging 26, 27 points. He's about a little bit over league average efficiency. He rarely turns the ball over. He's a super valuable player, but a lot of his value is the result of him making $4 million a year.
I know.
That's the fact that you are getting all-star production from a guy who is making $4 million a year. Like, that is a huge part of his value to the Sixers right now. In the same way that Tobias Harris's value as like a pretty good player is compromised by the fact that he makes like $40 million. So like they sort of balance each other out. But when this is going to reverse next year, we'll see how the Sixers can figure it out, because they're going to have money, but they also have to pay Maxey. I'm guessing, the mini max, which will be in the mid to high 20s, and then start escalating upwards, which I think they should do.
You have to
100%. Yeah, that's not even debatable.
His number has to go into the rafters for sure. You don't let Maxey go.
No. I'm not even hinting at like, should you pay him? I just mean that's the reality, is that they had an interesting window here, that if they were able to, have kept Simmons, if they were able to have had Harden or someone else, they would have had a really awesome opportunity to win a title with like the rise of Maxey into an all-star, with Embiid in his prime, and with somebody else. It just didn't work out. So we'll see what happens. I mean, if Embiid comes back, I think they can do some damage, because other than the Celtics, the East is just not that ferocious looking.
Yeah.
And that's also in part due to, the injuries that are, affecting not only Philly, but a bunch of teams.
And I think when I think about just in basketball terms outside of Philly and the Sixers, when you're confronted in the draft with a player like Maxey, you take him, and they hit, to your point. But, he wasn't like a top pick by any means going into the draft. And I think in a redraft, you take him obviously higher. But there is a danger taking a player like him, because if that player's good, you're going to have to pay him. And with a salary cap system, it gets tricky. Like, let's say the Knicks hit it with Obi Toppin, and Obi Toppin scored 25 points a game, made an all-star game, rebounded 9 per, and is kind of the same player he is. You don't want to pay him the max, but you kind of have to. Tobias Harris, I think of Allen Houston a lot. Exactly to your point. If Allen Houston wasn't a max player in that era, he would have been really valuable. The fact that he was a max player just made him like very good. You keep Allen Houston, you give him shots, he beats the Heat, sets the ice age in motion for that team, that franchise. But still, like, I think of these one-dimensional or two-dimensional players occupying a roster spot, the fans' mental capacity, and cap space. And it's just like, well, is that player a player who can shapeshift? And if it's not, we're kind of screwed here. We're not screwed, but like, it's not ideal that this money is going there. Like, we're seeing the ultimate shapeshifter now in Wemby, but I would be tentative around someone like Paolo Banchero or Donovan Mitchell. Like, of course they're going to get max money, but they are not their own system, big or small.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially right now, the way that that first contract is affordable in comparison to the second one, where, the money that Evan Fournier got, like $20 million a year, is not that different from, a maxed guy on their first contract.
Right.
So, like, economically, you're just like, sure, well, okay. Because when you compare that to, like, Jaylen Brown making $70 million down the line, you just kind of have to be okay with paying.
Yeah, he's one of those guys.
Banchero 35. You're like, all right, it is what it is.
You have to do it. You have to do it.
He's made an all-star team. He's going to make half as much as this guy. He's 22 years old, whatever.
Yeah.
Sure. And, like, finding good young talent is hard. And I think the main idea for NBA teams is get a few of these guys and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
You can't shed them until you really know what's going on.
I mean, yeah, not to bring it back to the Knicks, but, like, them signing players like DiVincenzo, scalable players like Hart for not huge money, super valuable. Shapeshifters, whatever. Players who can adapt versus matchups, injuries. Josh Hart turns into a different player when he has to compensate for Randall's absence. So, I don't know. I mean, I love Maxey, but watching the Sixers be this bad, I'm like, I wish he had a way to run actions that weren't the ones that Nick Nurse has him running. And I don't know if he's big enough or fast enough or skilled enough to do anything else. He's still playing well, but Nick Nurse is not running unique actions with him.
No, I think, look, if you redid the 2020 draft, Maxey goes top 5.
I agree.
I agree. You got Anthony Edwards, LaMelo, Halliburton, Quickly, Maxey, Desmond Bain. That's your top 6 right there.
I like it.
However you like those guys. They're all, so you got great value out of the pick. He's an all-star. He's a huge W. I just think if we're talking about the most common archetype in the NBA, it's the scoring guard who does some facilitation, is not a great defender, not a great rebounder, not a great facilitator, but can take care of the ball. There's quite a few of those guys, and he's one of them. He's good, but I think it's their proliferation that makes them less conducive to making your team better, because there's just a lot of those guys. Like, if you can find these guys, and most teams have them, then developing one doesn't necessarily give you an advantage that wins games. It's in the same way Jamal Murray doesn't win you games without Jokic. But when he's with Jokic, he becomes a really valuable commodity.
Yeah, the Sixers are in trouble, I think. I don't know if Embiid is going to be healthy. I'm talking past this season. I mean, I trust in Morey. I think he's the best GM in the NBA. And that doesn't mean, like, every season is going to be a success, but Embiid's injuries are starting to stack up, and his knee looks like a war zone. Sheesh.
Yeah.
This team's gonna have to get lucky with finding another player, but, like, I don't particularly love the future for this roster.
Yeah, we'll see.
For sure.
They've basically said our strategy is inherent on using this money that we've opened up after the season.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything at the deadline to use it in that way. And now they're going to be confronted with an offseason where if you say, oh, it didn't really work, we're going to punt another year, then I don't know where you go.
Yeah.
Does Embiid say, all right, you know what? I think if we're punting, then I'm punting. If we're going to do 2 years without adding, high-end talent, I've been kind of flirting with the Knicks for a while. Let's just make this happen. Mm-hmm. It could occur.
Sure. I mean,
I'm not saying he wants out. I just mean I don't know that the Sixers have the runway for another kicking the can, using the money on expiring contracts and sort of doing what they did this year. If you're Embiid, and especially coming off of yet another injury that sidelined what would have been a potential MVP season.
They're not embellishing what they already have. They're starting wholesale a little bit. They're going back with an empty shopping cart rather than being like, I'm just running in to get parsley, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it and say, well, we had Simmons, Butler, Tobias, Redick, and then you say, okay, well, we had Harden, Maxey, and me, and then you look at it and you say, well, it's me and Maxey now, huh?
Yeah.
Well, which direction are we going? But again, this is Morey's task. He's got to go and figure out how to acquire that player who changes this trajectory where there's less elite talent around Embiid than there was before.
And Morey's a big thinker. And, I mean, we're burying the lead here. This is the downfall of the nerd, man. These guys who sit behind computers, don't know ball. You have to go with your lunch pail. You have to put in hours at the gym to understand how to run a team, let alone analyze a team. You can't be airballing 3-pointers with the cameras running.
No. Just get back in your nerd castle, Andrew.
It's a fragile one, but it's a castle.
So you're talking about the viral clip. And when I say viral, it wasn't that viral.
Nah.
It was just within the basketball Twitter or Instagram community. And even the nerdiest of the nerdy within that. But it was Amin El-Hassan.
The call is coming from inside the castle.
Inside the nerd castle. Amin El-Hassan was...
Hassan,
excuse me, was videotaped, was recorded shooting a jumper on the baseline. And he had a curious release, Andrew.
Yeah, it was Reggie Miller-esque, like his hands crossed at the end. He missed the rim by like 2 feet. It looked short, wide right.
Yeah, he was looking a little bit husky. And then he fired up the shot, and people said it looked like he was throwing up gang signs with his hand as he released it. It's kind of almost a twirling of the wrist and fingers. And then, as you said, the ball was on a wayward arc, a wandering trajectory that took it several feet to the right of the rim, Scott Norwood style.
Yeah, and I love Amin El-Hassan. He has been funny. He used to work for the front office in Phoenix, and damn, he's got some amazing stories from back in the day. And he's been in the NBA, like, kind of inside circle for a while. But he took an analyst role at Meadowlark. He was at ESPN. He's super funny. He's got interests outside of basketball, which are dorky and not dorky. And he occasionally makes himself into a physical comedian and like ridicules himself. And he owned up to this. He was just like, ooh, I blew that one. Come at me, because if that was you, I'd come at you. He's been really funny and he does high-low really well. So I love all that. The interesting part of this clip was people started, it's always these songs that people have in the back of their heads that kind of come forward when they're triggered or when they're prompted. And everyone's just like, this guy analyzes basketball for a living? The fuck does this guy know if he shoots a shot like that? And I'm like, oh, one doesn't have to do with the other. Yeah, I saw that feedback, and that was there were people who were making fun of him, but there was this sense of incredulousness. As
they should.
Yeah.
It was a wild-looking shot.
He was making fun of himself.
But there was this incredulousness where this guy, wait, we're supposed to take him seriously as a basketball analyst when his jumper looks like this? And I'll be honest with you, Andrew. I'm like, are they have a kernel of truth there? Because certainly, I think, if you are a music critic, you don't need to be able to necessarily make music or play instruments. Or if you're a movie critic, you don't need to be a cinematographer. You just need to understand those things. You don't have to be good at creating them. And, if you were a restaurant reviewer and you were trying to find hashtag all the teriyaki, should you, in fact, be able to be a remarkable kitchen scientist? I don't know.
Or a game streamer, right?
that there are certainly elements of these where familiarity and expertise that you have are beneficial. I don't think that's a problematic idea to say, like, hey, if you're going to be a music critic, it's helpful if you can play music yourself. Okay, I'm all right with that. If you're going to discuss basketball, should you have a jumper that looks a little bit better? Okay, I don't know. Maybe that's true. That if you've played at a higher level,
yeah.
But you know what I mean. Like I'm okay. I'm okay with that idea. It just depends on the person.
Should the president of the U.S. be involved in politics, or can they just be a celebrity? Right.
Right. That's what I mean. I'm like, well, look, if he is someone who has a really, really crazy looking jump shot and is throwing up air balls, and he hasn't really played on any level at all, then why is he out there? First of all, but secondly, I'm just like, okay, that I'm not saying he doesn't have valuable things to say, but I understand the critique. If someone says, well, I played a D1 level and I understand all these things because I did it, I'm like, you're making an argument. I'm not saying you're right, but it's understandable.
I mean, I wanted to bring this up because I know you're the YMCA legend here. And I know it affects your imperfect takes. But, Amin Elhassan's an interesting one because he used to play, like, warm-up and pick-up with, like, Boris Diaw and Steve Nash. Like, he was like, oh, when I was younger, like, yeah, I used to put on my shoes and go out there and, like, ball out with the Phoenix Suns. And also he was like, I'm not good, but, like, we got our games in. And he's older now and, did not have a great-looking shot. But, yeah, I mean, it certainly helps when you hear Martin Scorsese talking about superhero movies, right? But it's also a bias that we all understand. When he's like, that's not cinema and it's destroying the art form, you're like, it's a valuable thing from a genius of this craft. But we know where you're coming from. You're a little salty. And I think the way Shaq is trying to create his role in this world by just like blankly saying like, oh, he's not me, or he doesn't remind me of me. No one's scared of him like me. Trust me, I knew everybody. I knew what players thought because I was in the trenches with them. I think that's valuable, and I love hearing players talk about experiences. And the better they were, the worse of narrators they are, because they're full of bias because they want to protect either their ego or legacy or whatever, or that argument. They want to win the argument. So good players are kind of like untrustworthy and valuable in a way, but I think if I was going to hire an analyst or someone to run a team, I'd be really hypersensitive of who was invested in the past.
Yeah, I guess my point was, I can get that perspective that, well, if this guy can't shoot a jumper, what can he know about hoops? But you're not talking about a normal person. You know what I mean? That's like what you'd say if someone walked onto a court and you toss them the ball. You're like, hey, let's play. And they chuck up an air ball with that weird motion. You'd be like, oh, this guy can't ball. What am I? Whatever. But that's not his job. He's not a professional basketball player.
Right.
He's an analyst. So my thing is, well, can you judge his analysis based on his analysis? Like, how is he saying the right things? Does he know what he's talking about? These are just different skill sets. And I mean, you are applying what you would apply to a normie to someone who has demonstrated like a deep familiarity and insight into basketball that is unrelated to how he plays. Yeah. So like, yeah, ultimately it doesn't matter for shit. Like a guy could go out there and have awful takes and an awful form, and we could all roast them, and it wouldn't be any more or less valid than roasting someone who does know what he's talking about but has bad form. It's all like we're not talking about what matters.
And
it's also funny.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. And I'm in my nerd castle here, and like it's not structurally sound, but I have not played organized basketball since like pickup games when I was in my 20s on Christie Street. But like, our book, we wrote about basketball, and we got a blurb from Mina Kimes, who I think like adds a significant audience and like money number to the NFL because she's so good at her job. I think like she's valuable as a satellite to the company of the NFL, and because she's so good at her job and she kind of can express an insight that we have not heard before. She used to write about finance, and that helped her kind of talk about football, which certainly seems like a passion of hers throughout her life. And she gets accused for not understanding the trenches of NFL games and how that affects her analysis, which is, to your point, like there's a modicum of a discussion there that can be had. But it seems anecdotal because I don't think Vince Carter, like, what are we talking about? Did Vince Carter not really catch on as an analyst because he wasn't as good as Shaquille O'Neal? It's like, do we start ranking players about how good they are now? Like, is JJ Redick, and he was accused of not being a good player when he came out with those statements earlier this year. And we were talking about his value as a player. Austin Rivers was like, you can't talk about my father. You weren't even good. I'm like, two different conversations. And everyone kind of understood that right away. The Amin Elhassan thing is even funnier and better because he's like good at accepting that ridicule. But this falls in line with, there was a meme or a question on a Twitter account that had a picture of Wemby, Jordan, and LeBron. And they're like, who would you start a basketball team with? And most of the comments were like, Michael Jordan, you guys are idiots. None of these players matter. It's Jordan, Jordan, Jordan. Jordan is God. Everyone else is just his minion, the M-bomb. And I'm like, oh, this is a question about people who think about the past, the kind of present, or the future. It just describes your personality. And most sports fans like to dwell on the past because our youths were amazing, because we were young and we had options. I don't know, man. I would pick Victor Wembanyama.
I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, I guess I would take LeBron, I guess.
For sure, right? It's one of those two. It's not Michael Jordan.
Well, only because I guess you take Wemby because you're saying we're starting a team now.
Or in their primes, like with how they played, like I guess it would have to be Miami, LeBron, championship number 3 for Jordan, and Wembanyama now.
Oh, I mean, if that's the case, then I'll go Bron. Oh, I mean,
that's a good answer. Whatever.
MJ's prime was like 30 years ago. Whatever.
Well, also in an inferior era. I don't think he can't go to his left, but like that era was bad in real time. LeBron's era was good and bad in real time, and Wemby's era is excellent.
No, yeah, I just think you take the most modern player
right
out of them, which would be the Wemby answer, except for like LeBron is still playing, so you don't have to go back that far. So he's still the modern guy.
Yep.
And we know how good LeBron is because he's done it. But yeah, man, we can't talk about Wemby yet again, but Jesus Christ.
He got worked by Jokic, though. I got to give Jokic some credit here.
He did. But even when he gets like worked, he still does some good stuff out there. But
he's better than any rookie I've ever seen.
Yeah, Jokic had his way with him. But then you look at the clips like last night.
Against a heater of a team.
I mean, sure. The Nets. But I mean, and again, we talked about this, and there's an article on the Cookies Hoops blog that talks about this, and like, it's not just that we need to marvel at the cartoonish box scores, like 7 assists, 7 blocks, 35 points, 15 boards. Like, yes, that's all true. It's all true. It's what it looks like. I know this is stuff we've harped on in the past, but I was cackling looking at those highlights from last night. Because it's trickier to watch Nets games than almost anybody else.
Do you?
Because of their network. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was watching the Wemby highlights and like LOLing at his reverse like dipsy doodle thing where he threw it off the glass and then he comes down and he like volleyball spikes the ball into the stands. It's like,
Do you have
Oh,
that
clips are
feeling
great.
with Bol Bol?
I think with some of the clips you could see that.
Bol
But
Bol's faster. I mean, not as skilled, not as big, not as tall, but Bol Bol has a speed that Wemby doesn't, which I find to be like breathtaking when you see a Bol Bol play get aggregated.
really good highlights from Bobo, for sure. But just the fact that all those Wemby clips were from one game and each one was just more absurd than the last. So, like,
Yeah.
dribbling behind his back twice, then the one where he wrapped the ball around his back and then went in. They're just all crazy. Anyway, so my answer to that is, I mean, you can't really take anyone over LeBron right now, but
I thought Wemby, but
I mean, Wemby might be the GOAT.
LeBron proven on this perfect pod that he's the most hated player in history. Is Wemby the most glazed player in history already? Because the superlatives of podcasters, not perfect ones, and the internet is just like, oh my god! I'm
Oh
like,
my God, they-
quit glazing, man.
My God, it's like Jonathan Glazer over there.
Yeah, that's like Milton
Here's my-
Glazer over here.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I've seen discussions about, you know, when are we going to stop glazing Booker or Ant or some of these guys who are really well liked. Especially Ant was one that came up. Booker's been around for a while, so I feel like he's gotten some criticism in the past anyway.
Oh,
But,
he's had bad playoff exits.
yeah. But I think Ant is one that kind of stands out where everybody really likes him. Everybody's calling him the future of the league.
Not this guy.
Right. I just mean, are we going to get to a point where, well, I guess we inevitably will, where will be a conflict between the people who've declared that he's going to be top 5, that he's already top 5, that he's MJ reincarnated, that he's that dude, that he's the most beloved guy, and then they're going to lose, and people are going to say, meh, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
we're
is
still
that-
at
is
the
that
honeymoon.
coming?
Yeah, we're still at the honeymoon phase with Edwards, right? For Wemby, I don't think that'll come until he gets a for real team. Wemby's a different conversation. Ant is kind of, and we've talked about this before, a casting kind of mentality. I think he fits the part. He's also American, so the NBA as a company has been pushing him ever since the summer when he played for Team USA. Like, he is next. I had a fleeting thought about him. It's like they want him to be the face of the NBA so bad for all the reasons we talked about. But he's so goofy that he'll go into All-Star Weekend and be like, I don't really want to try. This doesn't mean that much to me. You know what I like to do? I like to be funny and dress funny. So he's never going to be like who the NBA wants him to be. And I think that's when the honeymoon will be over. When he'll lose a series and people are like, yo, what happened? Was that a failure? And he's going to be like, I don't care. I'm a brand. I'm not a player, you know? And that's when it'll be over.
Well, it's funny because, you know, we just had this conversation about how Tyrese Maxey is a really good player, legitimate all-star, exciting, fun, charming, enchanting, all these good things, but may not have an oversized impact on like winning games in a way that different players of other prototypes can do. And Ant has virtually identical numbers to Maxey in many ways. 26 a game. He's averaging 5 and 5. Maxey is 4 and 6. They both have the same like tick over league average efficiency, 58% for both of them. Like same numbers offensively. And no one's saying Maxey is the future of the NBA. This guy is going to be the face of the league in 2 years, that he's arguably already top 5. So a lot of it is what you're saying about the central casting element. And he is charming, and his dunks are awesome. And I think he's obviously has the potential of being a much better defender because he's big and, he can jump through the roof. There's all these other attributes. But it's funny that offensively, we're talking about a guy who is putting up, Brunson numbers, Maxey numbers.
Yeah, he's good.
Fox numbers. Like, they're all pretty much doing the same thing. And I think you could say Brunson actually is doing it better than most of these guys.
Yeah, and I don't want to get all Buckingham Palace intrigue conspiracy about this, but like
Nerd Castle.
I'm in the halls of the Nerd Castle screaming, but Maxey will never get that treatment because the NBA does not like Philadelphia, does not like Hinkie, does not like the way this team was constructed. So that won't be the case. And the casting is specific here, right? Like Ant looks like the right kind of guy. He's bigger. Doesn't have like a haircut of note. He's just like kind of like a blank slate that I think a PR or marketing person of the NBA be like, yo, we got one on our hands, man. Is this the guy to take us into the next generation? And he might be, but to your point, he's a really good player. But Brunson could have been that guy, but he doesn't look like the main character of a basketball game. But I don't know, eventually it'll have a Booker effect.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Ant does have more upside than some of these guys just because of his size and his athleticism.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's valid, and I'm not taking that away from him.
And Banchero's not a high flyer, and Edwards is a jumper.
Yeah, I just look at around the league, and you see, that amongst the leaders who are technically qualified right now, there's just so many guards who are like that. It's like SGA, Brunson, Mitchell, Booker, Curry, Fox, Maxey, Dame, Jaylen Brown. I mean, he's a little different, but there's just a lot, and that's before you even get into like the second tier of those guys, like which is like the the Jamal Murrays and I mean I'm saying he's really good, but who don't score quite as much. The Kobe White. There's just a lot of those style of player. That's all.
Yeah, and the Timberwolves, since Towns went down, I kind of think Towns is their best player, but when he went down, they've been pretty good. So like Ant has done his thing. Like he's shifted into a different role. They've won 2 in a row. The last 10 they're 6-4. They're only one game out of the top spot. And that team is built well. He still has Gobert. Gobert's criminally underrated, I think. He's still like a huge component of that team that's healthy. So I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting to just see. I was thinking the other day, like, isn't it interesting? I think the NBA always wants a face of the league, but in Jokic's prime, we're also going to have Wembanyama. So, like, I don't know what the NBA is going to do because neither of them are the ideal candidate for this.
Yeah, it's tough because the NBA clearly liked this idea of small ball in some ways, right? Curry and perimeter players and the quickness. But it just keeps going back to the same thing that it always has. It's the best players are big. And in some ways, that's part of the enduring appeal of MJ, was that MJ seemed mortal. Even though he could fly.
Of course.
It was that you could ascribe his success to his mental state and his hard work rather than saying, well, you're 7 feet tall, Embiid, or Jokic, or Giannis. Oh, you're 7'5", Wemby. These are the best players in the world, and they're all giants. Even Luka and LeBron are both huge. They're like 6'8".
Yeah, there's that picture of Luka next to Barkley, right?
Yeah, they're big as hell in a way that Kobe and MJ are really the anomaly. And it'll be interesting to see if someone like SGA can break through and become a superstar. He's in a small market. He's Canadian, but he likes wearing. He's a drip lord.
Yeah, he's got too much personality.
He's extremely good, and I don't know if he can break through and be kind of or Ant as those next level stars that aren't giants, because that's kind of what the league probably needs right now.
Do you know what we need right now?
To end a perfect pod.
To put a bow on this perfect damn pod, because with that last SGA thought, you nailed it.
You need to raise the drawbridge and fill up the moat.
It's held together by like Legos and nerd stuff.
Some
Castle Vice, Taipei Vice.
cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love